The Nazca lines are a collection of giant geoglyphs, designs or motifs etched into the ground. Located in the Peruvian coastal plain about 250 miles, 400 kilometers, south of Lima, Peru. Created by the ancient Nazca culture in South America and depicting various plants, animals, and shapes, the 2,000-year-old Nazca lines can only be fully appreciated when viewed from the air, given their massive size. Despite being studied for over 80 years, the geoglyphs, which were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994, are still a mystery to researchers. There are three basic types of Nazca lines: straight lines, geometric designs, and pictorial representations. There are more than 800 straight lines on the coastal plain, some of which are 30 miles, 48 kilometers, long. Additionally, there are over 300 geometric designs, which include basic shapes such as triangles, rectangles, and trapezoids, as well as spirals, arrows, zigzags, and wavy lines. The Nazca lines are perhaps best known for the representations of about 70 animals and plants, some of which measure up to 1,200 feet, 370 meters, long. Examples include a spider, hummingbird, cactus plant, monkey, whale, llama, duck, flower, tree, lizard, and dog. The Nazca people also created other forms, such as a humanoid figure, nicknamed the astronaut, hands, and some unidentifiable depictions. Anthropologists believe the Nazca culture, which began around 100 BC and flourished from AD 1 to 700, created the majority of the Nazca lines. The Chavin and Paracas cultures, which predate the Nazca, may have also created some of the geoglyphs. The Nazca lines are located in the desert plains of the Rio Grande de Nazca River Basin, an archaeological site that spans more than 75,000 hectares and is one of the driest places on Earth. The desert floor is covered in a layer of iron oxide-coated pebbles of a deep rust color. The ancient peoples created their designs by removing the top 12 to 15 inches of rock, revealing the lighter-colored sand below. They likely began with small-scale models and carefully increased the model's proportions to create the large designs. Most of the known geoglyphs were formed by removing rocks from only the border of the figures, creating a kind of outline, while others were formed by removing rocks from the interior. Given the low amount of rain, wind, and erosion in the desert, the geoglyphs have remained largely unscathed throughout the centuries. The different Nazca line figures vary greatly in size, shape, and complexity. These were formed by digging the reddish and rusty soil of the place to reach a depth of 30 to 40 centimeters, discovering a lighter and yellowish layer of dust. In turn, the width of each line can vary from 40 to 210 centimeters. Also, it is possible to distinguish two figure styles. The biggest are those with animal forms with a size of up to 400 square miles. It is believed that those were used as worship zones. Nazca ceramic rests were found close to them. The second one are smaller, represents humanoid figures, and can be extended from 15 to 365 meters. These are located close to ancient paths. For this reason, it is believed that were used as references and location points. Toribio Mejia, a Peruvian archaeologist, began a systematic study of the lines in 1926, but the geoglyphs only gained widespread attention when pilots flew over them in the 1930s. Experts have debated the purpose of the Nazca lines since then. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, American historian Paul Kosak studied the geoglyphs from the ground and air. Based on the relative position of one of the lines he studied to the sun around the winter solstice, he concluded that the geoglyphs had an astronomy-related purpose. Soon after, Maria Reich, a German archaeologist and translator, also concluded that the designs had an astronomical and calendrical purpose. She further believed that some of the animal geoglyphs were representative of groups of stars in the sky. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, however, other researchers, including American astronomer Gerald Hawkins, examined the Nazca lines and disagreed with the astronomical explanation for the geoglyphs. They also poked holes in other far-out explanations, such as those relating to aliens or ancient astronauts. More recent research suggested that the Nazca line's purpose was related to water, a valuable commodity in the arid lands of the Peruvian coastal plain. The geoglyphs weren't used as an irrigation system or a guide to find water, but rather as part of a ritual to the gods, an effort to bring much-needed rain. Some scholars point to the animal depictions, some of which are symbols for rain, water, or fertility, and have been found at other ancient Peruvian sites and on pottery, as evidence of this theory. In 2015, researchers presenting at the 80th annual meeting of the Society for American Archaeology argued that the purpose of the Nazca lines changed over time. Initially, pilgrims heading to Peruvian temple complexes used the geoglyphs as ritual processional routes. Later groups, as part of a religious rite, smashed ceramic pots on the ground at the point of intersection between lines. Almost all Nazca lines drawings are faithful representations of some key animals in the Nazca culture. But there are also some images or figures that are a complete mystery, and this one is a clear example. Nicknamed the astronaut, the giant, or the owl man, this geoglyph leaves many puzzled and causes numerous outlandish theories about its form, use, and meaning. Moreover, some researchers even believe that it is an image much older than the Nazca culture, belonging to the Paracas culture. Precisely, this image appears to be the figure of a human being with large eyes and boots on the feet. Even, some argue that it may be a type of fisherman due to can be seen holding a net in his left hand, which is more logical due to the proximity of the area to the sea. In any case, today, this humanoid figure remains an enigma for many academics. The Nazca monkey is a large geoglyph, measuring about 330 feet long and about 190 feet high. Among the different geoglyphs, the monkey is one of the most iconic, emblematic, and fun Nazca Lines images. This monkey's geoglyph is represented by only 9 fingers and a spiral-shaped tail, and is another of the representations of Peruvian Amazon fauna, since it represents an animal not very characteristic of the Nazca Desert region. Although monkeys are clear Peruvian jungle inhabitants, zone located far away from the Peruvian deserts, their presence there may suggest some trade routes established during the rise of the Nazca culture. Its mere representation shows the great knowledge of the Nazca civilization about the fauna of entire Peru. The Nazca dog geoglyph has dimensions that do not exceed 170 feet in length. It is believed that this representation refers to the characteristic Peruvian dog, known as the Peruvian Inca orchid. It is one of the native races of Peru, which does not have hair. The hummingbird is one of these figures that has been represented more times in articles, studies, and even photography collections. Not in vain, Peru is home to many species of hummingbirds, with more than 125 registered species. For this reason, Maria Rostorowski, an important Peruvian historian, affirmed that the hummingbird was an important deity or flying god, respected and feared by the Nazca population. So much so that they offered offerings annually, so that god hummingbirds did not punish them with drought and lack of rain. This figure that attracts so much attention has an excellent layout. The measurement of its well-deployed wings and its pointed peak reaches an extension of 97 meters. This incredible Nazca line image is an amazing 320 feet long and 216 feet wide. The Nazca spider is about 150 feet long. This figure is part of a network of lines located on the edge of a trapezoid, and it is believed had religious and astronomical purposes. The condor geoglyph is one of the most famous and recognizable Nazca Lines images. But lately, some expert groups suggest that this figure looks much more like that of a chauquedo, a long-tailed nightingale. Precisely this bird tends to hover very close to the lines, making this theory probable. While the Andean condors can be seen more than 100 miles from the area in the Peru Andes. Similarly, the condor geoglyph is one of the largest and most surprising, reaching 130 meters long and 115 meters wide. The spiral geoglyph, like others, likely served as a visual representation of the Nazca people's beliefs and connection to their environment. The parrot is not so easy to spot, as there are hundreds of other lines traversing the area. But if you have a good eye, you will be able to at least make out its beak and head along with a large crest that protrudes from one side. The majority of these forms are circles and show us the uniqueness of its style. Unfortunately, the lower part of its image has been altered due to continuous erosion and human manipulation. Over there, some paths and roads were built. Despite this, you can still see its wings, which are curiously represented by two parallel rectangular shapes, which demonstrates that its representation and design are somewhat unnatural, unleashing the imagination of numerous theorists and academics who are drawn to the figure and have shaped many Nazca lines theories. The cat, recently discovered in 2020, was on a mound of a natural viewpoint near the lines. This cat with pointy ears, large round eyes, a long striped tail, and an open mouth has a length of 31 meters or 121 feet and shows an attitude of wonder. Unusual, within the general characteristics of the Nazca figures. Without mentioning that this cat was found already in ceramics and fabrics belongings of Nazca culture. For this reason, and according to the carbon-14 dating method, this image could have been made between 200 to 100 BC. In other words, the Nazca cat is older than many of the surrounding Nazca figures.